Hi everyone, today we are going to talk about the last part of activity 16, continuing on with our reciprocal functions. Now, in the last lesson, we started talking about our reciprocal trig functions, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Today, besides the unit circle, we are going to talk about some of their measures around finding all 6 of our trig functions. So for this first one, they want us to find the trig functions given the secant is negative 5 pi over 4, and we have a sign value greater than 0. So we first things want to make sure is we're drawing this in the correct quadrant. Now, our secant and its buddy cosine, they are going to be negative in the same quadrants, right? Our cosine and our secant are going to be negative in quadrants 2 and 3. And then the other piece of our information that we were given is that the sign value is greater than 0, aka the sign value is positive, which is going to happen in quadrants 1 or 2 where we have that positive sign value. So the overlap between both of these things is happening in quadrant 2. So what we want to do is we want to start by drawing ourselves a triangle in quadrant 2. Now our secant is our hypotenuse over our adjacent side. So in this triangle, they are giving us that the hypotenuse is 5 and the adjacent side, aka the x value to our angle here, is negative 4. Now the last piece that we are needing to find over here, this y value, can be found using some Pythagorean theorem because we have a squared and b squared. We can make that our c squared or help us find that c squared. So we have 25 equals y squared plus 16. Subtract over, we get y to be the square root of 9, which is 3. And in this case, our y value is going to be a positive 3 because in quadrant 2, the x value is negative, but the y value is positive. So it's going to be a positive 3 this time. And then we are just setting up each of these trig functions. So opposite over hypotenuse, adjacent over hypotenuse, and then opposite over adjacent. So reminder, if this is my theta value, hypotenuse is across from the right angle, adjacent is my x value, opposite will be my y value. And we start setting up these fractions. Opposite over hypotenuse would be 3/5. Adjacent over hypotenuse would be negative 4/5. Opposite over adjacent, usually we write that negative from the 4 out front. And then to find each of our reciprocal functions, we are just flipping these fractions. So instead of 3 over 5, we have 5 over 3. 5 over 4, still keep the negative. And then 4 over 3, again, still keep that negative. Now, our next example then is, again, going to ask us to start by figuring out which quadrant we are in. So if we have a positive cosecant value, that also means we would have a positive sine value, which happens in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. And then the second part, they're telling us that we are between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 for our angle, aka quadrants 2 or 3. So this time that overlap is happening where both things are true is again quadrant 2. So we're going to start again with our picture there. And this time when they give us the cosecant, that's the hypotenuse over the opposite side. So square root of 29 and 2. And similar to the last problem, we can solve for our missing x value this time by using some Pythagorean theorem. And if we subtract this over, we end up with 25 equals x squared. So the square root of that is 5. Now, reminder, in quadrant 2, your x value is negative. So we're not just going to put 5. We're going to use negative 5 as that adjacent side in our setup. And then from here, we again are just setting up our trig functions. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so 2 over square root 29. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so negative 5 over square root 29. And then tangent, opposite over adjacent, So 2 over negative 5, again, we tend to like to write the negative out front. Now, one thing to note for the sine and the cosine this time is notice the square root of 29 in the denominator. We must rationalize that. So if you multiply top and bottom by the square root of 29, we end up getting a nice positive 29 in the denominator, and then that square root is allowed in the numerator, just not the denominator. Now, when we flip our fractions, we would have square root of 29 over 2, negative square root of 29 over 5, and then negative 5 over 2. These three would not have to be rationalized because we didn't have a square root on the denominator, so those are allowed to be where they are at. All right, now in our next example, instead of being given some information, they're kind of directly telling you, hey, your point this time is to the right 3 down 9, aka in quadrant 4. And again, we do need to use Pythagorean theorem to help us find our missing side of our right triangle. This time, however, we are looking for the hypotenuse. So we would have c squared equals 90. And reminder, when you break this down, 90 can be broken down to the perfect square of 9 times 10. So we would really say that our c value is the square root of 9, which is 3, times the square root of 10. So 3 square root 10 is our hypotenuse, and your hypotenuse value will always be positive. Now this time for quadrant 4, hypotenuse is 3 square root 10, adjacent is 3, opposite is negative 9. Now when we set these up, we'd have opposite over hypotenuse this time. Be careful because negative 9 and 3, we could simplify that to just be negative 3 over square root 10 because these two can be simplified. Now similar to the problems up above, we also don't want to leave that square root of 10 in our denominator, so we'd have to multiply top and bottom by square root 10 to rationalize. For our adjacent over our hypotenuse, again, we can start by simplifying. 3 and 3 simplify to be 1, so 1 over square root 10. Multiply top and bottom by square root 10, though, to make sure that we have this rationalized. Last but not least, opposite over adjacent, negative 9 over 3 simplifies to just be negative 3. When we flip these fractions, then, essentially we are flipping these simplified forms, or again, you could kind of look at them the unsimplified. So hypotenuse over opposite, this would simplify the 9 and the 3, because they're both divisible by 3, we could get this, negative square root 10 over 3. The secant, if we flip that, hypotenuse over adjacent, again, these cancel, and we just have square root 10. No need to rationalize. And then when we flip adjacent over opposite, simplifies to be 1/3. All right, now on this last one, you are given a point 6, 2, and that means the first quadrant, right 6 up 2. Start by finding your hypotenuse, and then find each of your trig values. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll work more with these in class.